We begin with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo firmly defending President Trump on his summit with Vladimir Putin as he heads to the UN for high-level meetings on North Korea this morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith. Happy Friday, everyone. Live inside America's newsroom.
Good morning to you.
John.
I'm John Scott in for Bill Hemmer today. Secretary of State Pompeo set to address the media a few hours from now after meeting with members of the UN Security Council, including Ambassador Nikki Haley. America's top diplomat saying last night that as of right now, Kim Jong-un is holding up his end of the deal.
No one's been closer to that than I have. So everyone else is simply speculating about what's taken place today. I've been there. The North Koreans have consistently reaffirmed their commitment, the commitment that Chairman Kim made to President Trump. No one was under any illusion that this was going to happen in hours or days or even weeks. It's going to take time.
We have live Fox team coverage. Kevin Corke is at the White House, and we'll get reaction from Washington Examiner editorial director Hugo Gurdon. But we begin with Rich Edson at UN headquarters this morning in New York City. Good morning, Rich.
Hey, good morning, Sandra. And at the bottom of this hour, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo begins his meetings here at the United Nations in New York with the foreign minister from South Korea, UN Security Council officials, Japanese officials, and UN leadership to update them on United States negotiations with North Korea to relieve Kim Jong-un of his nuclear weapons program. Secretary Pompeo just returned from Pyongyang. It was his third visit to that city. It's unclear what specific firm commitments Kim has made on dismantling that nuclear program. Secretary Pompeo insists Kim understands U.S. demands and is committed to surrendering his program. The State Department refuses to offer a timeline, only acknowledging there's still a lot of work to do to accomplish this. Analysts have also said that satellite images show continued North Korean work on some of its weapons production facilities. Secretary Pompeo says the U.S. has secured at least a commitment from North Korea for the return of the remains of American service members who were killed during the Korean War. That's expected in the next couple of weeks, he says. Now, here at the Security Council, there are efforts from China and Russia to ease sanctions against North Korea to reward it for already negotiating, though South Korea's foreign minister has rejected that idea. The Trump administration has also said it is pushing continued enforcement of existing sanctions against the Kim regime, and it has refused to enact additional sanctions against North Korea. Now, we asked the State Department while the Secretary of State is here at the United Nations whether he would meet with any representatives from the North Korean government. The State Department would only say that that is not on the schedule, and they'll update us on any type of changes to that schedule if they do occur. The meetings begin here in less than 45 minutes for the Secretary. Sandra?
All right, we'll look forward to all that. Rich Edson, thank you.
Meanwhile, President Trump vowing to be very tough on Vladimir Putin if diplomacy fails, as the White House invites the Russian president to make an official visit this fall.
Getting along with President Putin, getting along with Russia is a positive, not a negative. Right. Now, with that being said, if that doesn't work out, I'll be the worst enemy he's ever had. The worst he's ever had.
Kevin Corke, who's one of our best friends, is on the North Lawn with that part of the story. Kevin?
Always great to be with you, my friend. Go Colorado. By the way, if you missed all the news yesterday, I'm sure you heard a great deal about it. Speaking to the folks at home, just know this. From the White House's perspective, this is not a do-over or a redux as much as this is a continuation of an important conversation. The president making those commitments during the summit in Helsinki, and he'd like to see them play out actually right here in Washington beginning this fall. Let me take you to Twitter and show you what Sarah Sanders had to say about it yesterday. That really sent us scrambling, John, in the afternoon. She said in Helsinki, the president agreed to ongoing working level dialogue between the two Security Council staffs. Then she said this, the president asked Ambassador Bolton to invite President Putin to Washington in the fall, and those discussions are already underway. Now, that announcement underscores the administration's push to engage Moscow in a way that could lead to better relations. But the president, as you pointed out, John, said yesterday, that doesn't mean that this administration will be soft on Russia.
Look at the sanctions I've put on. Look at the diplomats I threw out. Look at all of the things that I've done. Nobody else did what I've done. Obama didn't do it. Obama was a patsy for Russia. He was a total patsy. Look at the statement he made where he thought the mics were turned off, okay? The stupid statement he made. Nobody does a big deal about that.
President once again being animated about some things that have happened in the recent past. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who clearly would take the lead on any new talks, described the president's thinking this way.
He's trying to take opportunities, places where we find we can work together, and put America in a position to do the things he wants to do on behalf of the American people.
And that's the idea here at the White House. They want the president to continue to advance our agenda by engaging Moscow when and where we can, John.
So the director of national intelligence had an interesting reaction to the news yesterday about this Vladimir Putin invitation to Washington. What is the White House saying about that?
Yeah, interesting indeed. He was actually over in Colorado. And look, the White House will tell you, they weren't exactly thrilled by the reaction, but they certainly understand, because when you think about it, John, he's got a portfolio. Ambassador Bolton has a portfolio. He can't be expected to know what everyone is doing across the senior leadership. But I want to share for the folks at home his reaction to being told about what Sarah Sanders had to say on Twitter. Watch here.
The White House has announced on Twitter that Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House in the fall.
Say that again? That's going to be special.
Okay, a couple of ways you can look at that. Little levity at a conference, or a damning indictment of the information flow within the administration, or maybe somewhere in between. But White House officials tell us, don't make more out of this than we ought. Back to you, John.
Even the nation's top spy can't be plugged in every minute of the day.
That's right.
All right. Kevin Cork at the White House. Kevin, thank you.
And as we mentioned, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo repeatedly making it clear last night in that interview that the president understands the threat from Russia.
Watch the noise these last few days. The president's been very resolute. He understands precisely who it is we're dealing with in Russia. He gets it.
Hugo Gurdon is the editorial director at the Washington Examiner. He joins me now. Hugo, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So should that interview calm the president's critics?
Well, it should, but I think you and I know, Sandra, that it's not going to. Nothing has calmed them in the 18 months since he was inaugurated. So, you know, the truth is that the president's performance in Helsinki was weak, and it was disappointing to a lot of people. The thing, however, to remember is that the critics, while they might be right on the performance having been weak, they're absolutely, it is absurd, as Mike Pompeo said, to say that somehow that performance proved that President Putin has some sort of dirt on President Trump, that it has some sort of hold. You know, President Trump is absolutely right when he talked about the things that he has done to counter Russia. The things that he didn't mention there was just a few days before the Helsinki summit, he was excoriating Germany for a business deal on a gas pipeline, which he said was enriching Russia. He's boosted American troop levels to counter Russia. He sent deadly weapons to the Ukrainians, including sophisticated anti-tank weapons. These are not the actions of someone who seems to be a puppet of Moscow.
You know, DNI Director Dan Coates, in sort of what appeared to be a bit of a light moment, depending on how you look at it, learned of this upcoming meeting with Putin in Washington, perhaps this fall, on that stage there. But nonetheless, a meeting with Putin in Washington. Is the White House perhaps giving everybody something to look forward to maybe distract from the Helsinki summit?
I don't think that this is intended as a distraction. I mean, the last several days have been a certain amount of damage limitation because of the way that Helsinki was. But I suspect that, you know, President Trump is just not going to be deflected from his efforts to have a better relationship with Russia. He sometimes does that in a very clumsy way. But, you know, there's also the fact that his administration and the White House springs surprises on its own administration. So, sure, that information presumably took Mr. Coates by surprise, and that is the kind of thing which administration should try not to have as big surprises.
What did you make of the president really taking on Obama there? He's made the point many times that he's been tougher on Russia than Obama ever was, but he said Obama was a patsy for Russia.
Yeah, you know, that's not a completely wrong assessment. He referred to the tape where President Obama was reassuring the Russian prime minister that after the election, and he had no more elections to run, he could be kind of easier on Russia. When it came to the Ukraine, President Obama refused to send the kind of weaponry that President Trump has sent. He sent sort of pretty much useless things like blankets. You know, the truth is that President Obama was in the way that in his actual policies softer on Russia than Trump has been. The odd thing is that there's a big gulf between the rhetoric and the actions. With Obama, the actions were softer and the rhetoric was a bit tougher. With President Trump, there's been plenty of tough actions, but the rhetoric looks ridiculously soft sometimes.
All right, the news will change quickly this morning with Mike Pompeo attending those high-level meetings at the UN. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Hugo Reardon.
Thanks, Sandra. Thanks.